Hello there. So I'm going to do something a bit different today. Basically, I signed up to GAB. Yes, that GAB, the place where people too toxic for Twitter get banished to, a few years ago to basically continue a conversation with someone who got kicked off of Facebook. And I haven't used the account since. But I have kept the account and kept on the mailing list for GAB because honestly, it's fucking hilarious how every month, almost without fail, there is a note, a sort of newsletter from the guy who runs it. And this guy talks absolute fucking insanity. And every now and then, whenever I'm bored, I stop to read it. And I'm like, okay, this is some of the funniest shit I've had the misfortune of reading. So this is a new one, and the title alone grabbed me. Masculinity will save the world. Okay. And basically, he's going to now explain to us how being a over-masculine, compensating dickhead is going to basically save the planet from those pesky beta males or some shit, I don't know. Hopefully it's a bit more nuanced than that, but I don't hold my breath. So the opening bit is about how they're like... send a message to the Biden administration, stop killing Christians. I forgot about this bit. So yeah, Revelation Media on a campaign, send a message to Biden, stop killing Christians. Because I don't know if you know this, but every day Biden shoots a random Christian in the head. Christians are the most persecuted people in the United States. They have no rights, and if you are a Christian, you can't get elected into office, as the past has shown us. It's not like it's the complete opposite or anything, and it's also not that it's like the most dominant religion in a lot of parts of the United States. No. Christianity is... it's like ancient Rome, people, okay? If you're a Christian, you get killed for saying it. You have to meet up in those little things with Ben the Baker and have secret meetings. So anyway, petition for a good cause. The cause is to save Nigerians from Christian persecution, which admittedly does sound like a good cause, but I don't know much about this shit, so I'm not just going to give to it blindly. I might read into it and give a quid or two if I feel like it actually might help anyone, but I don't know. If it's tied to a site like this, Okay. We've all heard and repeated the mantra ad nauseum that politics is downstream from culture. I can't say I've heard of that one, but okay. It's true. The right fallaciously defined its investment solely based on the ROI in one's bank account through the lens of a one-dimension capitalism, in turn leaving all creative industries abandoned where we find faith-based and conservative artists in the middle of the desert with no home. The radicals swarmed in with their patronage and now control the dreamscapes of your progeny through their aesthetic stranglehold of the arts and entertainment. You see, this guy uses like big words to mask the fact that he doesn't, like, he's talking shit. But the gist of what he's saying is that if you're a conservative or even just... and by conservative, he means some asshole who insults random people with his work, that people choosing not to engage with that work anymore because it's personally insulted them for no good fucking reason are scum because they're not paying to be insulted. I mean, I loved Dilbert growing up, and I still do. I love classic Dilbert. I quote it all the time. But Scott Adams' insanity, killing the series more or less, yeah, that's his fault. I'm not supporting it now. Like, I mean, I haven't read it for years because, in all honesty, like, I used to read it as the first thing in the morning back when I was in college, and I haven't really had time or reason to. But even then, like, I don't feel an ounce of sympathy for someone going on a bizarre tirade politically and scaring off their entire fan base. Sorry, like, if you want to do that, you are welcome to. He's not been arrested for it, so you can't say his free speech is in jeopardy. His work is just not being admired by the same people anymore because those people just don't agree with it. And if they feel as if they're personally being called out for no good fucking reason, then they don't have to put up with that shit. It's like going to see a stand-up comic who basically just spends the entire fucking run just screaming fuck you at the audience and then complaining that people are leaving because they're bored of it or they just don't want to be screamed at for an hour. Like, I get that there are stand-up comics that insult people, but usually everyone's in on the joke. They don't just insult one guy for like the entire hour, especially not in a mean-spirited way like some of these things do. And so we have a widespread liberalism and atheism brainwashing generations ahead of us in all creative spaces. It's kind of funny because a lot of people who I know who went to a Catholic school left atheists. And you know what's funny? I've said it before, and I'll gladly say it again for this video. It wasn't atheists that convinced me to be an atheist. It was actually other religious people, through their absolute desperation to get me on board with their bullshit. And they tried to use pathetic fear tactics, which just didn't work. And instead of making me want to engage with religion, it just put me off it. And then when my engagement with religion was hanging on by a thread, someone came and cut that thread in the hopes that they could catch my engagement before it dropped into the abyss. But they were a bit too slow on the mark, completely fucking missed, and now my spirituality is in the abyss because of these people. I have been through so many wasted hours of my life listening to how I'm going to suffer and die for not agreeing with someone that I just have no interest in your shitty religion. That's not brainwashing. If anything, it's reverse brainwashing. You have convinced me that these ideas are not worth following for your idiocy. Well done. It's time we start becoming active participants as either talent, collector, or patron. Every art gallery you visit in New York, much like every church in the city, has either Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ rainbow flag for a reason. In other words, if you ain't with us, you're against us. I mean, there's two problems with that. One, yeah, that is kind of true. If you aren't with gay rights or black rights as things, then you are kind of against it. I mean, you can't really sit on the fence and say like, oh, well, you know, I do and I don't think these people deserve rights. Like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, you can say, I do think that these groups are wrong in the way they do things. I wouldn't fault anyone for saying that. I wouldn't fault anyone for saying that, you know, that they personally feel as if some elements of these groups exaggerate the amount of persecution they go through. Again, I'd say fair enough, that's an opinion. But people who just literally get triggered at the sight of anything just are pathetic to me. Like, I don't understand how you can be this pathetic. Also, I've been in a few galleries. I went to one in Scotland, the Edinburgh one, and I went to one in Manchester about a year ago now. And from my personal experience, I've never seen a Black Lives Matter or gay pride segment of these galleries. I don't know what he's on about. Is this an American thing? Because most people who go to art galleries are just there for art, and usually art is, well, the best art is subtle with its political bullshit. And upon deeper introspection, all of this chaos, from the welfare state breaking down the nuclear family to the grotesque assaults and property damages displaying during these so-called protests, I'm pretty sure Capitol Hill's riots will be different for some reason. Also, the shambles identity-oriented hatred of white Americans in a country that is 75% Caucasian. Is it? I mean, I'm not saying it's not. I assumed it was a bit lower than that. All of this is only possible only because masculinity has been silenced in conjunction with the perilous state of the American church. But you see, like, it wasn't better before you had the breakdown of the nuclear family. Because when you ask a lot of people from my dad's generation, what would happen is that two people would meet in the 1920s, they'd get married almost instantly, and then they'd basically hate the fact that they were married to each other for the next fucking 60 years, but would not get a divorce because they couldn't. That was the story of everybody in my dad's generation. It's just full of like husbands and wives who probably should have been divorced decades ago. But because this society wouldn't allow it, they had to stick together and they just lived in misery, or at the very least not fulfilled throughout their entire lives. The children weren't happy because they could sense it. And, you know, their parents would act out because of it. And nobody was happy. I'm not saying that it's perfect when you have like single mums and kids, and sometimes, like, you know, they might be financially worse off. The mum might be unstable. Maybe the dad is unstable and he's attacking the home every now and then and stuff like that. I've seen that side of it too. But this idea that a nuclear family is instant perfection, that everybody's happy, that everyone's supportive and everyone likes each other, it just doesn't fucking... It's not a fact. It can be that way, but I've seen families that are, you know, welfare state broken down, a lot more functional and happy. I know a lot of people who have had divorces who are very smart and intelligent people who broke apart a nuclear family because it's just better for everyone involved. And honestly, if you do feel like you need a divorce, you best get in one instead of fucking kidding yourself and just going from no longer wanting to be married to this person to despising one another. I like as well how he talks about the American church, but like the church had its fair share of censorship. Like, even going back to a certain point in history within the last 100 years, the church banned a lot of stupid shit. And honestly, if it had its way, Dungeons and Dragons and fucking E.T. and the Care Bears and the Smurfs would be banned. The church is reactionary and stupid, and giving it power is an absolutely terrible idea. Just think about the last time you've seen an unapologetic masculine figure in the dominant narrative who's taken the culture by storm. Superman. Batman. Literally every action movie starring someone like Jason Statham. John Wick. Yeah, in the dominant narrative. So I assumed he was talking fiction. He's actually talking about fucking just in general. Okay. Barack Obama. Fucking... So I had fiction ones in mind now, so now I'm trying to... Hell, Boris Johnson? Donald Trump took the culture by storm. If that means what I think it's meant to mean, I don't know, because it's just wish-wash. But yeah, he did. He took the fucking culture of the country by storm. A lot of the things you're saying and doing are as a result of his babbling and bullshit. The 45th president, Donald Trump, cancelled. Alex Jones, cancelled. And even Andrew Tate, cancelled. I don't understand how... I mean, Alex Jones is the only one. And maybe Andrew Tate, I don't know. But, like, yeah, they had their stuff pulled. But I don't understand this idea that... Also, Donald Trump's still very much out there. Like, he's not He's not been hobbled to the point where he can't do anything. The thing is, though, these people, when they lose their place on a network or sponsorship deals because of things they say and do, that is not anti-free speech. If anything, that is a consequence of free speech. Like, I don't know, if my local church fucking backs me for something, if I get sponsored by it, let's say, and I make video after video saying how shit Jesus is and how he deserved to die and everything he said was a lie and you all suck for believing in him, do you expect them to keep giving me money to say that shit? If I later come out as to having trashed a church on camera 5 years ago and then tweeting, look what I did, does that mean that the church is obligated to keep giving me money knowing that that's what I did? Like, there's a difference between... Yeah, I understand that sometimes people get fucking the plug pulled on them for saying something, which in all honesty I don't think does any harm. But at the end of the day, that is not... If somebody is paying to put that person in the spotlight, they are more than welcome to unplug said spotlight. They are not obligated to keep paying to have someone say something that damages their brand. I don't understand how people don't get this shit. I really don't. I'm not saying I agree with all of these men in a single wholesale write-off. That would be flippant. I am, however, stating that these men are phenomenal in the first place because the West is starving for honourable and traditional masculinity. Honourable and traditional. I mean, Donald Trump's had multiple divorces and he's a fucking serial liar. He fucking has done loads of dodgy shit financially. We like to forget about Atlantic City a lot, but he did that shit. He doesn't pay people for work that they've done for him. Like, working class people have been fucked by Donald Trump because they did work. Often that work involved them paying expenses to make sure the work was done, and then he just refused to pay them at the end. He goes to foreign countries, knocks down people's houses and builds fucking golf courses on them. Yeah, honourable and traditional masculinity. Fucking bullshit. He's also completely and utterly weak in debate. He just says bullshit for people like you to gobble up. Alex Jones is also a fucking insane mental case who actually could have had a career, but he fucked it because he could not keep his mouth shut for more than 3 seconds. So he went on British television and started screaming his head off. This was the first time a lot of people in Britain, he could have had an entire audience in Britain, right, who actually could have taken him seriously. And he became the biggest joke in, honestly, the history of the BBC. His conduct on that stage was so bad that they had to cut him off and remove that section of the programme within 5 minutes of a debate. Because every time anybody else tried to say anything, he would shout over them. And he would act like his opinion mattered more than everybody else's. But he's a free speech advocate, apparently. Also, he literally went on for years saying shit like Bill Gates dresses up as a werewolf and molests children in the woods and shit like that. For years. So him getting sued doesn't fucking surprise me in the slightest. It really doesn't. He's been saying shit that is frankly deflammatory about people for years. And I think the only reason why he hasn't been sued before is up until this point, most of it's been too ridiculous for anyone to take seriously. Anyone who's not a complete and utter nutcase. Andrew Tate cancelled. Is there a point to this sad story? I'm not saying I agree with him, blah, blah, blah. In its absence, we have overcompensating and stereotypical bullies or fragile little snowflakes afraid of confrontation. What, you mean like people who turn up to an art gallery, see Black Lives Matter written on a wall and then fucking cry and run away? You mean like that kind of masculinity? And by bullies, do you mean people who fucking go to Scotland and tell everyone that they have to leave their homes that they've lived in for as long as they possibly, for decades? And then basically when they refuse to leave because they live there and they don't want to fucking leave, you basically make their life hell until they have no choice. Do you mean bullying like that? Because that's what your super masculine heroes do. That's why nobody fucking respects them. It's why I spit on them. These people are pathetic. It's like Ben Shapiro was put on a fucking pedestal for a while. And it's like, the dude goes around to campuses basically debating first-year students and then trying to make them look stupid because, wow, a 21-year-old who's only just started their course doesn't have all the answers in the world. But I do, even though I don't, because if I had to debate someone like fucking Stephen Fry or Neil deGrasse Tyson, I would run away pissing and crying, lock myself in the ladies' bathroom, and try to fucking find comfort in my one piece of wood that I bought to own the fucking libs. In its absence, the matriarchy or matrix can only succeed when strong men, are quiet. Okay, matriarchies and matrixes are different things. Like, a matrix is a bunch of things that connect to each other to create a sort of web. Better referred to as like the Matrix in the movie, where it's like a bunch of data basically creating a virtual reality world. But I don't know how anything you've described there makes us live in a virtual reality. And the matriarchy thing, if we live in a matriarchy society, why is it that there hasn't been a woman president and there also hasn't been a woman prime minister in recent history who's lasted more than 2 years at most? It's almost like that's complete bullshit. And there are women leaders of countries, but the ones that stay there usually deserve it. As Arthur Schlesinger Jr. wrote in Esquire on November 1st, 1958, I'm sure this is going to be fucking teeming with wisdom. What we have here is a crisis of American masculinity, fellas. Even as far back as 3 generations, we reveal the vilification of men embracing their maleness as more of a problem than a natural God-given right. No, it's just that men who legitimately believe that they were the god of their own home and their own little world were wrong. Them dictating what people can and can't do in their own home and basically running rampant was not a good way to do things, oddly enough, because it resulted in unhappy wives, unhappy kids, and in all honesty, these men were not powerful. They were just working people who only had power in their homes. Like, they weren't happy. Like, they were really angry and really upset and frustrated with everything. It's just that they wanted to feel powerful, so they grabbed power in the home, and now we've just said that we can't allow that anymore because it's cruel and it's stupid, and these people really need to get something else in their life. In fact, most of these people do have something else in their life. It's just people who don't, who cry about this shit. People like Marshall Mathers, for instance, they're the ones that mourn the 50s when the man was the king of his own home. Whereas, modern day people are just like, I don't want to be the king of my own home. I want it to be equal between my partner and I so that, we are equally in charge so I don't have to do everything. While I do not use disparaging terminology we hear today like toxic masculinity or the patriarchy, but it's okay to call it the matriarchy, the language of the article exhibits a generation of men who feel self-conscious about their conception of masculinity. I mean, I'm sure there would have been a conceptual masculinity issue in the 50s because, well, in all honesty, there were probably a lot of people who served in the army and national service was starting to end. So a lot of these guys probably felt inferior. It's just stuff like that. A lot of guys as well were basically under the impression that if they weren't in charge of their own home space by the age of, I don't know, let's say 20, they were completely worthless. If they lived with their parents at 25, they'd completely failed at life. Whereas now we're a bit more open about the idea that not everyone can afford that shit. And instead of blowing away all your like prospects before you even reach 25, we instead study and do things with our lives for a few years. For example, I stated on stages across the country a dozen times, while you stand-up comic, that the appeal of hip-hop is rooted in the egregious single motherhood rate, especially in the black community. What? Okay. And the freedom to be hyper-masculine in the absence of balanced example at home is the allure young men have to the thick gold chains, prostitutes, and face tattoos. But you see, shouldn't that be a good thing? Because that is basically grown men in a civilized world living like tribal kings. Like they embrace their base instincts and live like materialistic 13-year-olds. Also, that's more rap than hip-hop. Hip-hop's not quite like that. It's hip-hop's more like Will Smith and shit, like from my experience anyway. I mean, it can be as is described here. It's just that's more of a rap thing, like Big Clit and that. Competitive video games, Donald Trump, and gangster rap all share the desire to swing the pendulum as far as possible in the other direction in a culture that penalizes any semblance of masculinity in the public square. I thought competitive video games were bad because they caused mass shootings, according to your boy Donald Trump, but okay. Thing is, though, I don't really feel masculine playing competitive video games because competitive video games tend to result in you being humbled from time to time. Even if you're good, like the Jaded Rabbit is a fantastic Mortal Kombat 11 player, but he still loses almost every day because that's honestly just playing one game after another. You are going to lose once or twice, no matter how good you are. And in all honesty, if I really want to feel powerful and like a real man, I'd want to play something like Skyrim where I control everything because there's no other players to get in my way or fuck it up for me. I'd want to play something like Crusader Kings with cheats on, but growing up watching films with my father in the evenings, such as Indiana Jones, Braveheart, and Shawshank Redemption, was both entertaining and educational. I mean, we still have stuff like that. I went to see Black Adam yesterday, and Black Adam is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in a tight suit, killing hundreds of people with lightning and not giving a shit when people be like, yo, dude, you can't kill people. And he's like, I don't fucking care, get out of my way. Like, that is the kind of masculinity you like. And that exists. Shawshank Redemption, you had Prison Break, that's very similar. Braveheart, I mean, there's going to be an example similar to Braveheart. There's movies like Braveheart every year. Also, William Wallace in that movie is a nonce because his love interest was actually 9 years old in natural history, so not so educational as you think. Because for some reason, the 9-year-old girl was 30 in that movie, and William Wallace apparently boned her, which, yeah, he's a nonce, I guess. You are being shown that good ultimately triumphs over evil with bravery and discipline. I mean, is that what a lot of these things were about? I think you kind of missed the point in some of them. Like, there weren't really good people in Shawshank Redemption because there's no good people in prison. And he doesn't really triumph over evil either. Like, he loses most of his life to evil, then escapes evil. He doesn't triumph over it, not really. He does have a few minor victories before the end of the film, but like, he doesn't exactly proclaim as king of the prison and make it a just lander. And it's spoiler alert, by the way, he doesn't become king of the prison in the realistic prison drama. Same with Braveheart, if I remember right. Like, at the end of the day, he doesn't triumph over the enemy. The enemies still win in the long run because, well, is Scotland still like Braveheart? No. Indiana Jones, sure, I guess, but Indiana Jones is like the most basic bitch of a thing. Like, it's meant to just be cathartic. It's not really meant to be deep or interesting. See, that's part of the problem that these people don't like, is the fact that a lot of these things are about very complex people, very complex characters. I mean, look at God of War, how they changed Kratos. Kratos used to be a masculine wet dream, and now he's quiet, reserved, he's very damaged in comparison. But he's still a very strong figure. He's a very strong father figure. He's a very strong man. I don't know if I'd say that he's what all men should want to be, because the guy has issues, but they have changed him in a way that's more fitting to the times. But at the same time, the games actually are still good and actually haven't demasculated him or any of that shit. So I don't quite get what they're on about with this. I feel like they've not looked at all the fucking superhero movie posters. You were shown that femininity in men predispose their destinies to weakness and failure. Yeah, and it wasn't a good thing. I mean, the only representation of certain groups of people were just what you said. They were just weak people. It's like Name of a Rose has that guy who's queer and he just fucking whips himself and beats himself and he flagellates himself as punishment for being who he is, and he's not happy. Fast forward to today, where every sitcom dad is predicted as a blathering idiot who consistently trips on his own shoelaces only to be graciously connected by his all-seeing and compassionate wife. Yeah, the idiot dad trope isn't liked by anyone. It's basically what happened, because I'm not surprised you don't know this, not even because of who it is or anything, it's just like one of those things that has a bit of a history to it. So basically, way back in the day, the trope was actually the opposite, that the woman was a moron and the dad was the one that kept everything together. And the Flintstones did the opposite. They were kind of brave at the time, and they were like, what if the dad's a moron and the wife's secretly the smart one? And as a result, you got it in later things like The Simpsons, Home Improvement, Family Guy. A lot of these things that you sort of like grew up on around the time of Indiana Jones, Braveheart, and all that shit, all did the dumbass dad trope. And the main reason for that was it goes back to the Flintstones. The problem is now every single dad in a sitcom has to be a fucking idiot. And the level of how stupid they are has gotten worse and worse with every decade. Like, even characters like Homer Simpson have gotten worse just as characters, because they're like, started off, Homer Simpson was slightly dense, but he had a good heart. And it was the same with Peter Griffin, whereas now it's like they're so stupid and so ignorant and whatnot, like they're less likable as characters. Like they've gone to the level of functionally retarded in some cases, because that's apparently funny. Whereas before they just weren't that bright, and it wasn't really seen as a bad thing because, well, you know, they made money for the family. It wasn't really, they didn't need to be smart. They just needed to be able to work and provide. And a lot of the stories were about them understanding things, whereas now they're just about them basically being stupid and getting into messes because they're idiots. And in all honesty, I agree that I think that's stupid, because like the whole dumbass dad trope has been played to death. I mean, I could write a list, but it would take me the entire video to come up with every single one I can think of on top of my head. I mean, Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron both came out around the same time, both have the same fucking character as the dad. It is insane. But anyway, yeah, look at Phil Dunphy or Homer Simpson, and then look at our movie titles. But the thing is, though, Phil Dunphy and Homer Simpson were like that during the Indiana Jones's airings, and like back in the 80s and 90s, they were like that. They were always stupid. They were always useless idiots. Tim Allen in Home Improvement, same thing. Fred Flintstone back in the 50s. She-Hulk, the Woman King, and Suffragette. Well, She-Hulk is about the female version of the Hulk. The Woman King, I never heard of, but I'll take your word for it that it's a thing. And the Suffragette, I'm assuming, is about the suffragette movement, which is historical, which is therefore going to be educational. Outside of film, we have normalized terminology such as toxic masculinity and the patriarchy on college campuses. I don't think people really say that stuff, like outside of ironically. I mean, I went to university, nobody was saying that shit. The reason Matt Walsh's documentary What is a Woman went viral in the first place is due to masculinity being shoved so far into the corner and a collective recognition that there is a strategic effort to debase and target all the trappings of classical masculinity here in the West. What we need is some masculine art, and thankfully they provided us with this masculine art of a man covered in shiny crystals to show us how butch and masculine he is. We've been saved. But I do find it funny though. I think I can't remember what point I was going to make with the fucking weakness in effeminacy or whatever. But depending on what you class as, there's the Crow. The Crow isn't like your typical masculine man, and he was quite a strong character. There are a lot of like strong characters who are like in the 80s and 90s who didn't fit that thing at all. In fact, depending on what you're looking for, some of the examples you gave, like the main character from Shawshank Redemption, he wasn't that strong or tough or brave. He wasn't Schwarzenegger. He was a lawyer, if I remember right. He was just a dude who just goes through prison. He's not the most ripped guy. He's not the smartest guy. He's just some dude who goes through shit. And as a result, it's like, honestly, do you really want every fucking thing to star just a big meathead who punches every single problem that he encounters? Like, you never want a movie like, I don't know, Inception or Downfall. I mean, Downfall's a classic example. I don't know if people would consider Hitler to be a masculine figure, but he's the main character. He goes through an actual struggle and a triumph and a downfall, as the movie implies. Lord of the Rings is about a midget trying to deliver a piece of jewelry, and it's one of the most beloved films of all time. One of my favourite series is Doctor Who, which is about a guy who doesn't believe in violence at all. But he's not weak or useless, or he's a woman at some point. But he's not a weak man. If anything, he's a very strong man because he has to actually swallow these instincts and these impulses to just react violently to situations and actually try to find a solution, which is a solution and not just catharsism. You know, when he's written well, there are some episodes where they fuck up the character a lot. But Batman's the same thing. Anyway, here's some art. The Blood and Fire Project is a mission-oriented art series devoted to spreading the aesthetic appreciation of masculinity. Dude, just go jerk off to some gay porn already. I know this is how this is going to end. Just jerk off to some gay guys fucking each other in the shower. An ongoing painting series depicting the rise and fall of men throughout history, rendered in a fiery tone to promote awareness of the sacrifice that undergirds the very culture that we've taken advantage of. Masculinity needs to be revitalized, both in and out of the arts, with its rise means a stronger church and country, and it starts in your home. The objective of this paint series is to get men all over the country to install an original 11x14 artwork that represents a wholesome and benevolent representation of masculinity. So buy this painting to own the libs, okay? The Blood and Fire Project is a reminder to endure all things in the light of God and protect your valuables by never being silenced. What, you mean I have to put my hands over my balls? Anyway, because of your masculinity, we have martyrs, church fathers, warriors, philosophers, and iconic men of the West reminding you that your masculinity is not meant to be hidden. It's not mansplaining or manspreading. Do you know what any of these terms actually mean? Do you just get annoyed at them because of who uses them? It is self-masturbatory and overcoming of adversity. It is catharsis and it is liberation. You see, that's what this strikes me as. It's not masculinity, it's catharsism. Like, get yourself armed, be an example of a tool, collect some art and be a tool. Right, cool. That's the thing though, like, when I think of masculinity, I don't really think of what this guy's describing. I think of someone who has the balls to stand for what he actually thinks and feels, who will get into a confrontation if necessary to protect something worth protecting. And I don't mean with violence even. Just a well-placed word, or, you know, even just standing in the way of something. I don't think there's a guide, like a basic bitch guide as to what makes someone masculine. Like, to me, it's very subjective and silly. And in the end of the day, there are a lot of women who are more masculine than a lot of men that I'm aware of. Like, like there are. I hate to say it, but there just are. I mean, I'm not her #1 fan or anything, but if it was fucking Ronda Rousey in a fight with Alex Jones, yeah, I don't think I'd bet on Alex Jones, just saying. So yeah, that was Arthur Kwon Lee on Gab. He's also got this bullshit you can buy, and he's got these hats. You can get a GAB Make Speech Free Again hat and a USA flag with a cross on it, because that doesn't look fucked in any way. I mean, I'd call that defacing the American flag personally, but you know. Anyway, so yeah, that's my latest GAB newsletter. I'm not going to do every one ever. Just every now and then, if I find one that's particularly funny, I'll poke fun at it. In the meanwhile, have a good Halloween. I did want to talk about the Halloween stuff, actually, because I kind of hit burnout, and I wanted to do 3 videos before Halloween, and I finished none of them. And I feel bad about it, I really do. But I don't want to kill myself trying to basically get 3 videos done. And they won't be of the best quality if I do. The Halloween video that I wanted to do, I don't think is going to be ready for Halloween. There's no way in fuck I could finish it for Halloween, so it's probably not going to be finished until mid-November. I feel bad, but at the same time, it's like, I've just reached a point where anything I make at the moment is not going to look good. It's not going to be good. It's just going to be fucking shit. So I'm going to work on stuff, and it does mean we'll get more content in November. I wasn't originally planning on doing anything in November, but I think I'm going to start the first bit of November making content, and then finish up with a nice Well, a nice Halloween video that will probably come late November instead of late October. Oopsie doodle. I do have something small planned for Halloween that should be decent, but, well, until then, toodles.